So in the last lesson on cross-site scripting, we completely destroyed the database that was stored here on the XSS stored page. It will not even stay on this site. It will say hacked, and then take us to the GE website. Well, let's clear that up so that we can do some SQL injection. Let's go to Setup and then reset the database. Now if we come back to cross-site scripting stored, you'll see it's back to empty, with just one comment down there and none of our other attacks. That's the great thing about DVWA. We don't have to do a lot of work to reset everything. We can just come back to Setup and reset the database. Well, let's go to SQL injection, SQL injection. That's the other broad class of HTML or website attack that we need to be familiar with, because anytime we have a form that interacts with a database, and most of our forms interact with databases because we want to store that information that someone's entered in on our server, we need to take care to make sure that we don't enable SQL injection. That means injecting some SQL or the structured query language that runs our database. I'll give you just a quick example. Let's submit a user ID. Let's try 1. And it tells me that that's the administrator. 2, Gordon Brown. So I'm just looking through a database. And this is, of course, made to be a little easier than normal. We normally can't just test through all of the different users here. All right, so we have about 5 users, it looks like. Well, that's because it's using just the ID information here, right? So it's taking in this 1 and turning it into a query that goes on to the database. Well, we have our DVWA security set to low. So if I come back to SQL injection and say 1 quote, or 1 equals quote 1. Now this is a strange syntax, I know, but I'll zoom in a little more there. That is 1 quote or 1 equals quote 1. This is a query. I'm changing the query in my normal SQL. Usually this is where user ID equals quote and then whatever we put inside 1. And so we've said 1 quote, so admin, or 1 equals 1. Well, 1 is always equal to 1, right? And we put this quote here so that when it finishes the quote on the other side of the database, this should do something completely different, because 1 is always equal to 1. So it's not true for just one user. It's true for all the users. 1 equals 1 is true for admin, Gordon Brown, Hack Me, Pablo Picasso, and Bob Smith, all. That is one of the simplest versions of SQL injection or SQL injection. We just asked the database to tell us everything. But in this case, we were able to see all of the users, their first name and their last name, just by doing one piece of SQL injection. And this piece of SQL injection was not even terribly advanced. It's just 1 quote, space, or, and you could do just about anything. You can do A equals A. And notice I just don't close that second quote, because I've closed my first quote in my SQL statement, my SQL command out in my web page with this one. So I need to open another one back so it'll finish it out. And this command should do the same thing. Well, A is always equal to A, so it's going to show for every one of those users their first name and last name. There are some much more advanced things that we can do with SQL injection, and we'll see how to do things like showing all the password hash values, and even how to see the name of the database and maybe even delete the database of all of these users in the next lesson.